Okay, so when talking about confidentiality in news gathering, when discussing reporting on government officials versus judiciary, one main similarity that I find is that they're both used to protect somebody. For government official reporting, it's used to protect the sources, and then for judiciary, it's used to protect whoever's on trial and make sure that a fair trial does happen. And then one of the big differences that I found was the difference between shield laws and gag orders. Shield laws are used when discussing reporting on government officials, and that tends to happen before, like, being able to request information and figure out the sources, and it seems to have more specific steps into getting subpoenaed and subpoenaing the either media company or the reporter. But then the gag orders, when relating to judiciary fields, happens after. At least that's what it seems to be happening after, in order to try to get that information as a reporter from the court and fighting for the release of that information. So that's what I found.
Hi, I'm Ella with Group 6. So in regards to confidentiality in relation to reporting on the judiciary versus reporting on government officials and agencies, there were definitely some key differences. I noticed differences and similarities. I noticed the first similarity that I noticed is that the punishment for, a journalist violating a gag order or refusing to name their sources, in both situations that will likely end up in fines or even jail time for the journalist. So that was one similarity I noticed, and then also in both scenarios, it seems like it's possible for the journalist to counter the ruling in favor of, like, freedom of the press or the public's right to know. So the laws, it seems, are definitely just a little bit hazy, like they're, it really is dependent on the situation, and a lot of the times the freedom of the press can trump, the either the government agency or the judiciary's, like, desire to keep things under wraps. Or the other way around. Sometimes, when it comes to the, criminal justice system, a lot of the time in high-profile cases, it's very important that the jury is not swayed by outside opinion, and so it's really important to, keep journalists out of the courtroom. So yeah, and then some differences I thought about were, it seems like when it comes to government officials and agencies, it seems like it's more when confidentiality is more focused on the actual sources that the journalists use. Like, the agencies really want to know, like, who is the whistleblower, who was the leak, who gave their information to the journalist. And I think a lot of the time too, like in these agencies that are really prone to corruption, higher government agencies, a lot of the time they try to, scare the journalist by threatening jail time or, trying to pressure them into revealing their sources. But a lot of the time, you can't get inside information about government, about things happening in the government without an internal source. So it seems like, it would be really difficult for a journalist to get inside information without promising anonymity. So, yes, and yeah, and then in the judiciary, the need for confidentiality within the courtroom, it seems like it's more focused on, the individual's right to a fair trial, and also even maybe like the safety of everyone involved, like in certain high profile cases it could be that the the person who's on trial is very dangerous and has ties to the community, and it's just sort of better to like not allow any outside opinions or observation, at least until the trial is over. So yes, that is what I noticed. Thank you.
My name's Lena, and I'm going to be starting from the very beginning because I cannot make sense of everything I'm seeing tonight. Confidentially news gathering means journalists protect the identity of sources, especially when they're sharing sensitive information, which could put all these sources at risk. This helps reporters gain the trust and uncover important stories like corruption and misconduct. When they're reporting a government official, confidentiality is basically often used to expose the wrongdoing, the corruption, and policy decisions. Sources might include staff members or insiders who fear losing their jobs, or honestly facing any political consequences. In this context, journalists rely heavily on anonymous sources, and there is usually strong public interest revealing information about those people that are in power. A difference in reporting on a judiciary involves stricter limitations, which courts operate under rules designed to ensure fairness and impartiality. So journalists must be cautious, which leads to confidential sources or less commonly used information about legal proceedings is typically expected to come from official records or statements. Once leaking confidential judicial information can interfere with due process or influence a case, which makes it an ethical concern even more serious. Basic similarity in both areas is confidentiality helps journalists access important information along with hold powerful institutions accountable. But a main difference is the level of restrictions. Reporting on government officials allows more flexibility with anonymous sources, while reporting on the judiciary requires greater care to avoid harming the legal integrity or violating court rules. In the end, confidentiality is a cruel tool in journalism, but how is it used depends on the balance between informing the public and protecting the fairness of the institutions.
Hey guys, my name is Austin Seek-Toops, and there are quite a few thoughts I had about the text in terms of confidentiality within news gathering. So, first of all, journalists and reporters do face an insane ethical battle between betraying their source or being possibly in jail. And the way this works, according to the text, is states have laws to protect reporters and journalists from this. Essentially, a journalist is allowed to not reveal their sources and to keep reporting on this issue without revealing their sources, which could potentially break a case. At the federal level, this doesn't exist, which in a way I think is good, because when a case gets to that kind of level, I don't know if people should be protected, if that makes sense. But it shouldn't fall on the journalists to have to air it out. So it's a very serious ethical battle. And this is because of a ruling in the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't remember what the case was called. But essentially, they ruled that at the federal level they can't protect journalists. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. But yeah.